Welcome to Commander Central, episode 294, and today we'll be taking a look at the best commons and uncommons from both Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Hey Max, how's it going today?
Great. It is a balmy 30 degrees out in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Winter is here, unfortunately.
I don't really like it very much myself.
Yeah.
Went for about a 2-mile walk yesterday, and my face was pretty numb afterwards. Although the ironic thing is, I kept thinking, in about 2 or 3 months, 30 degrees will feel like shorts weather after you get used to it, but it's miserable right now.
Yeah, it definitely is not great. It snowed a little yesterday, too. Wasn't a fan of that.
Yeah.
Why do we live here? Why do we live here?
I don't know sometimes. And Chris is out sick this week, so it's just the two of us. And I was dealing with some work stuff or traveling for work last week, so you guys went without me. So hopefully next week the three of us should be back. Well, we will see if that all works out.
Yeah.
Any interesting games or anything get played, Max? I know you still have your zombie deck that you have been trying to get reps with. I'm not sure if you've got much, though. Have you got to play very much?
I have not played that deck very much. I did play on Wednesday night. I was on Colin O'Clock's stream.
Oh, nice.
I played with Andy Zupke and James from our Slack and Colin. It was a great game. I played Dramoka. Everybody's deck kind of got to do its thing, and Andy ended up going infinite with a Thassa's Oracle out on the battlefield. So it was a really good game, back and forth, and then the infinite combo just kind of won it.
Sure, nice. I have not been playing much lately. I was literally out of town for like 8 days for work, and I did go to the shop this week to play, but my son and a couple of his friends from his D&D group were there, so I spent the first couple hours basically just kind of helping them because they're all learning. So I played, but like it was, very slow, and I was mostly helping versus actually getting any games in. I did get one in toward the end of the night, and I wound up dying to my own Phyrexian Arena.
Oh, wow.
And I killed 2 people, and I had 2 life left, and I'm like, okay, and I had blockers up, but I knew I was going to be okay to kill the third player, the Alloro player, on my following turn. So I'm like, I had a plan, and I forgot that when Alloro does this thing, it also deals 1 damage to you. So the Alloro was able to deal damage to me to take me to 1. And then I had no way to stop the arena trigger on my turn.
Oh, no.
I mean, if you're going to go, you might as well die to a Phyrexian Arena. That doesn't feel really very bad at all. So, yes, I got killed by drawing my card.
I will say this. I got to finally cast an Eye of Vecna in my Dramoka deck the other night. And, I hurt myself quite a bit with that, trying to find an answer to some stuff. Ooh.
You gotta do sometimes.
Yeah.
We'll have to get together and make sure. I mean, we're going to we have like a little friends trip coming up in a few weeks where we're going to play plenty, but we'll have to get together before that and try to get a few games in as well. Because I haven't played with you for a while.
Yeah, same here. We definitely should.
Well, if you out there in listener land want to reach out to us and talk about some games you played, how would you go about doing that, Max?
You can hit us up on Twitter or Facebook by searching CMDR Central, and you can also find all our content on YouTube at CMDR Central.
And you can also find us at patreon.com/CMDR Central.
Yeah, head over there to check out our reward tiers, such as a Decks You Play show, or joining our community to play some virtual EDH with everybody, or just chat with us.
We are always around on the Slack if you want to talk, and we have a really good community there of people that are regularly firing off games. So, join up, stop in, and have a good time. Yeah,
and we have a bunch of new people to say hello and welcome to. We want to say thank you to Jury, Gabriel, Nate, Colin, Derek, and James.
Thank you all very much for supporting the show, and thanks to everyone out there who supports us, whether it's from Patreon or just by listening or liking or upvoting the show on whatever platform you choose. We appreciate it. It means a lot, so thanks to everybody out there. I think we have a couple of giveaways going on through the end of the year as well, Max.
Yeah, so if you support us on Patreon by the end of the year, we will be giving away a couple different prizes to our Patreon supporters and from that drawing. The first being a Sealed from the Vault Transformed. We also have I don't remember exactly what Chris said it was last week, so it's either a Plane Chase anthology or that Nicol Bolas Archenemy set. It's one of the two.
One of the two, okay.
I think it's Plane Chase, though. And then the third is a donation from listener and Patreon supporter Matthias, a Grim Monolith.
Oh, wait, what? A monolith?
A Grim Monolith.
A basalt monolith.
No, a Grim Monolith.
An actual Grim Urza's block Grim Monolith we're giving away.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so if you are a patron supporter by the end of the year, that is,
Correct.
You'll be entered in a chance to win one of those 3 things.
Correct.
Well, happy Christmas.
Exactly.
Well, thanks to our supporters who gave us these things to give away, and thanks to, I believe, you and Chris for providing the other 2 prizes.
Correct. Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to help out. Good to see these go to a good home.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot to everybody. Yeah, that's exciting. Someone will have a very nice Christmas thanks to all those things. There wasn't a lot of news necessarily this week. We're kind of in the post-Crimson Vow what was it? Is it New Capenna next, or what's next?
Isn't Kamigawa
Oh,
first?
yeah. Kamigawa Neo Dynasties in January, I believe. So, yeah, we're not going to have anything new in terms of cards for, 8 weeks or so. But we just got another Secret Lair announcement, right?
Don't give me hope, Dana, that we're not going to have cards to talk about for 8 weeks. Don't give me hope.
I'm not going to, because it was a ton of Secret Lair stuff, too.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go over it. The one interesting weird thing was there was actually a full pre-constructed deck based on Gavin Verhey's coin flip deck he built. So, you can buy a full Secret Lair 100-card pre-con deck. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and the fact that it's based on Gavin's deck, or maybe it is his deck, is super cool. He kind of designs the game. I think the deck's probably going to be really good then. And
it seemed to have pretty good value, too, looking at the cards that were in it. Yeah, there was a bunch of different things, a bunch of different art styles, a couple of cool Dracula cards I liked. There was a nice kind of primo version of Knight's Whisper, which is one of my favorite cards, so I might pick that one up. All the Dracula art that I've seen for those Secret Lairs has been fantastic so far. So that's pretty cool. We're actually going to get some Secret Lair versions of the Arcane League of Legends stuff, which is really an odd crossover, given League of Legends has its own Magic-esque card game as well. So that's kind of a strange Secret Lair one. But yeah, there's just a ton of things that are coming out there, so there's just too much to go into. If that's your thing, take a look. If not, hey, once again, it's one more way to get reprints out there and knock the prices down. So I'm a fan of that as well.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, so let's kind of jump into this main topic here. We had talked, or I guess we hadn't talked about it because we hadn't done a set review for either Crimson Vow or Midnight Hunt. We mentioned how those are out already and done, but we just didn't do set reviews because we did 14 previous set reviews this year, and that's barely an exaggeration.
Barely.
Yeah, and we just didn't want to do one because at this point when there's a dozen Commander shows out there, and that's probably being conservative, doing set reviews, it's tough to have much interesting to say that isn't already being said. However, in kind of looking at these at the end of the year, we do want to say a little something about the two of them. So I think what we decided to do here is, instead of just talking about the same rares and mythics that everyone is talking about, we just went through and picked a handful of commons and uncommons that just probably didn't get reviewed, and they were probably very easy for, the average person just going over the spoilers list to just not pay attention to. It's easy to focus on the mythics and the rares because they're just bombs, but very frequently there's playable commons and uncommons in these sets that you just kind of don't look at. And we thought it would be fun to just look at some of these and throw them out there, some commons and uncommons that could very easily go in Commander decks that are at that level and that were very easy to miss. So, Max, what's the first one you want to talk about here for us? Okay,
the first one I want to talk about is Search Party Captain. This was a common from Midnight Hunt. It's 3 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier. It has a few extra clauses on here. It says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you attacked with this turn, and then when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. I think this is great in like a white weenie or token deck because you can easily make this a single white to draw a card. If you have a blink deck, once it's down, it's pretty rare when it enters the battlefield, draw a card on a white creature, so I definitely see that being advantageous in like a Brago or a Rune deck. I just think this is a really good card for 4 mana. Can easily be 1 mana.
Yeah, it's going to wind up being 1 mana very, very often for a 2/2 that draws you a card that's in 2 of the most popular or easily met tribes that are relevant to. If your humans is very popular, soldiers are very popular. It's both of those things. I was actually, when I first saw this, I was like, is that good enough for Brago? It probably isn't, but it's not bad for 1 mana to blink. It's easy to get down and then blink it every turn. There's enough blinkable things because Brago is white and blue that draw you cards, but it's not terrible for that deck.
No, The issue, I probably won't run it in my Brago deck just because it's pretty rare when I attack with more than one creature.
Right.
So for me, it's going to be a 3-mana draw card versus a 1-mana draw card. But if you're building like a budget version, this would totally go in there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so as well. And, talking about, we're talking about this strictly from Commander, but like, I would take this all day long and limited for sure.
Oh, yeah, this would be everyone you find, you pick.
Yeah, for sure. Cool card, very, very playable in a bunch of different decks. First one I'm going to talk about here is Lantern of the Lost, uncommon. And the easy comparison here is Soul Guide Lantern. They both cost a single mana. They're both artifacts. They both say when, the respective card enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard. The difference is Soul Guide Lantern has 2 abilities. You can sacrifice it to exile each opponent's graveyard, or you can spend 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card. Lantern of the Lost just has 1 ability. It costs 1, and you exile it, and you exile all cards from all graveyards, then draw a card. So Lantern of the Lost, you always get the card draw off it, but you hit your own graveyard. Soul Guide Lantern, you don't hit your own graveyard, but you have to choose between drawing the card and hitting your opponent's graveyards.
So run both is what I'm hearing.
I mean, maybe if that's if you play against a lot of graveyard decks, I would say the difference probably winds up being, like, I don't think one's better than the other. Soul Guide Lantern's a really good card. I run it in a bunch of different decks. The difference probably is if you yourself are not using your own graveyard, because that's just something that happens sometimes. You're playing the right color combination or the right deck style and you just don't care about your own graveyard. Then Soul Guide Lantern hitting only your opponents is kind of irrelevant. At that point, you might as well run Lantern of the Lost, because you don't care if you lose your own yard, and get the card draw every single time. So it's, I would say, as good as Soul Guide Lantern, which is already a really, really good card. It just probably depends on the specific deck you're playing in whether you want to use it. So it's a really good card, and I will expect this to see a lot of play just depending on what you want to do.
My next card, I'm sticking in white, is Thraben Exorcism. This is an instant from Crimson Vow for Midnight Hunt. For 1 and a white, you can exile target spirit creature with Disturb or Enchantment. I specifically like this because you can exile an enchantment. That's pretty rare to do in mono white. Typically you see that in the black-white spells like your Anguish and Making and Utter Ends. So the fact that this could get rid of that doubling season or that search for Azcanta before it flips is huge.
Yeah, the exile makes a big difference. Right? There's just not a lot of those. The Disturb clause and the Spirit clause are kind of a bonus, but it's an instant speed exile enchantment. That's just not something that you encounter very often and is very, very useful.
Right, and kind of to your point about the last card I talked about, in Limited, I think this is pretty good too, because that's where you're going to see the Spirits and the Disturb stuff.
Mm-hmm, for sure. All right, the next one for me, Into the Night. 3 and red. It's a sorcery that says it becomes night. That's going to be less relevant the vast majority of the time unless you happen to be running this in your werewolf deck or something. It'll just turn it to night and then it'll flip back and forth between night and day and nobody will care. What's important here is it says discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards +1. So it's a one-sided kind of winds of change that puts you ahead of card, first of all, and doesn't run the risk of you giving your opponents a bunch of good stuff. Additionally, that's a good way to trigger, madness things that you want to do with like Angie Falconwrath, or it's a good way to put stuff in the graveyard if you're playing some Reanimator deck. A lot of that's one of the powerful things when you do Faithless Looting kind of effects. In this case, though, it gives you the option to do your whole hand, which is very, very useful. I don't really have any decks that want this myself currently, but it's a card that I grabbed a couple of because I'm like, I can absolutely see situations where I want to run it or will want to run it down the road. So it's a really neat card that I think has a lot of applications, even if I currently don't have any of them right now. And it's one of those silly things, too, that like you'll be able to buy it for $quarter right now. And because of the night clause on it, it's probably not going to be very easy to reprint. And 6 years down the road or something, you're going to look at it and be like, when did Into the Night become a $2 card? Because it's just probably never going to get reprinted aside from, I guess, the upcoming double feature set. And it's very, very useful in a lot of situations. So yeah. Into the Night is a card that I would say, just grab 1 or 2 of them and have them sitting around. You're going to come out ahead on a grand scheme of things, but you're also just going to feel terrible paying $2 for it in 2025 or something when you want it for this new madness deck you're putting together or whatever it is.
Geez, $2 in 3 years. I could see that happening.
I mean, for example, because we were just talking about Soul Guide Lantern, Soul Guide Lantern's almost $2 already.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes in more decks, it's colorless, but like, that kind of thing with as popular as Commander is, that kind of thing just happens with even uncommons nowadays. So, all right, Max, what's next?
My next one is Consider. This is a single blue for an instant. You can look at the top card of your library, and you may put it into your graveyard, and then you draw a card. Chris and I actually talked about this card a little bit last week because we thought it scryed. Instead, it just lets you put it in the graveyard. Again, it fuels your graveyard for those decks that care about it. If you're doing top stuff and you're manipulating the top of your library and you just want that card gone, it'll get out of the way. Or, worst case, it's it triggers Prowess. It triggers all those extra, spell copying stuff, and you still get to draw a card. I don't know if I like it more than Opt, but if you're playing graveyard deck in blue, this is probably better than Opt.
I have it already in my Talrand deck. I'm running it there because it's instant speed, 1 mana, replaces itself, lets me get rid of that land off the top. Yeah, I am running it and like it quite a bit. I also will note, I went to the Crimson Vow pre-release last Saturday, and after I left that, I went to a friend's house and did a Midnight Hunt draft for my friend's birthday party. So he had 6 people over and we did a draft and then just played, a full round. And I wound up, the first pack, I can't remember what I took, but then had a Delver passed to me in a second pack. And I'm like, Delver's always good to take. And I wound up then building red-blue and got a second Delver and a third Delver over the course of the game.
Oh, jeez.
And I think I had 2 Considers as well. So that was I just ran in basically an instant or sorcery deck and was multiple times able to have Delvers out flipped over on turn 3 and have multiple Delvers flipped on turn 3, which is just something you don't come back from, particularly in a limited environment where you're doing a draft or something. So yeah, Consider felt great there. I'm already playing in 1 Commander deck. It's a really solid card to run, I think. I would guess, especially if you are playing some kind of a zombie list where you tend to want to get those creatures in the graveyard many times.
Yeah.
Very much one I like. And so since I just mentioned cards that I've already taken from these sets that are uncommon and put into decks, Whispering Wizard. 3 and a blue for a human wizard. It's a 3/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. This ability triggers once each turn. Already in my Talrand deck. I got one of my pre-release last weekend. I already put it in that deck. So you have Murmuring Mystic, very similar thing that makes bird creature tokens whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. That can trigger multiple times per turn. This can only trigger once, but this also triggers off planeswalkers and artifacts, and Murmuring Mystic does not. So very, very similar card, even kind of a similarly alliterative name, Whispering Wizard versus Murmuring Mystic, And in the decks where you tend to run these cards, like in my Talrand deck, where I have, 36 different instant speed spells, yes, it's kind of unfortunate it only triggers once per turn, but it's very easy to just instead of casting my Consider and my Opt and my Brainstorm in 1 turn, I'm just going to cast my Consider, pass, then cast a Brainstorm. When that person passes, then cast the Opt, and still get all the triggers without really caring. It's going to functionally work just like a second copy of Whispering Wizard, of Murmuring Mystic in that deck, or Docent of Perfection or whatever. It's just one more of those things that's going to make you token bodies in that kind of deck. And actually, I wound up playing my Talrand deck last week, when I was playing with those younger kids at the shop, and I got this out and was, it just was indistinguishable from Murmuring Mystic in that deck as far as productivity. So if that's the style deck you're playing where you care about making things offensive and sorceries, really, really good card. And again, it's strange to see it as an uncommon considering how useful it is, but it's one to not skip over for sure just because it isn't a rare. It's really, really good.
Thank you for explaining the thought process about why you like this card, because the minute I see these clauses about they only trigger once per turn, I kind of instantly push them aside.
And depending on the card, that can be a pretty big road bump. In this case, just because of the kind of deck it wants to go in, it's much easier to play around it, I found. So
that makes sense. Because you have other effects.
Yeah.
Having one not work every time you cast something is fine because you have 2 or 3 other things out that do the same thing multiple times.
And again, because of the way it works, you cast the artifact spell on your turn, get the spirit, and then just do the instance on other people's turns, and it just doesn't play much differently than the Talrand does or the Murmuring Mystic already does. So yeah, real good card.
Gotcha. My next one is one we both had on our list, and that's Thirst for Discovery, another entry in the Thirst 4 type cycle. So this is 2 and a blue for an instant. Draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a basic land card. I mean, that's really good. Most people run a lot of basics in their deck. I know I do. I don't know about you, Dana. I know you run like 4.
I don't.
So I don't know if you'll play this card very often.
so we have Thirst for Knowledge, which is the exact same templating. And you discard 2 unless you discard an artifact, and you have Thirst for Meaning, works the same way, but you discard an enchantment. Both of those see a good amount of play. I would much rather pitch a basic land than pitch an artifact or an enchantment most of the time, unless you're trying to do some kind of like reanimation or something with the artifact. Enchantments, you're not doing much of that. So like if you're treating the discard as a downside, this has less downside, quote unquote, than Thirst for Knowledge, because it's way easier to pitch a basic land without feeling like you've lost out on something than it is when you're pitching an artifact.
Yeah, I mean, basic land, I wish it was any land, but I'll take basic, I guess.
And, Thirst for Knowledge is an 8,000 decks in EDH Rec. This could very easily wind up in that many decks over the course of the next couple of years. Again, just because it's so much easier to pitch a land, particularly if you're playing, for example, mono blue or something. I like that card a lot. And since we're talking about blue stuff, instant speed as well, I guess, Secrets of the Key that was in Midnight Hunt. It's a 1 mana instant that says investigate, so it makes a clue token, and then if this spell was cast from a graveyard, investigate twice, and it does have flashback for 3 and a blue. So when all said and done, for 3 and 2 blue, so for 5 mana, you're going to make 3 clue tokens. If you're just using those clue tokens as draw spells or something, I don't think that's particularly good. However, there's a lot of artifact decks out there, things like Brea, or even my Veil of the Nightclad artifact deck, that just wants physical artifacts in play, whether it's to be sacrificed to Vela, or whether it's to count towards, whatever Nettle Cyst kind of effects you have out, where it gets bigger depending on what artifacts you have in play, or the various Tezzerets that deal damage based on artifacts, whatever. There's a bunch of different things that care about this. Being able to make 3 artifact tokens for 5 mana at instant speed is pretty decent, let alone the ability to, if you need to, then sacrifice those to draw cards. It's not the kind of thing I'm just going to put into any deck, but I had this on my shortlist for Vela and I wound up not using it, but I was really considering it. The ability to make those clue tokens is very, very good. And if I was playing a deck that had Academy Manufacturer in it, where I'm making clues and food and treasure whenever I make one of the other ones, and had access to blue, I'd play this for sure in that deck. My Vela deck isn't running Manufacturer, so that maybe not do it there, but if I had access to that, would make it a much more likely included in the deck, I think. So, it's I think a decent card in general, but if you're in one of those kind of decks, I think it could be very, very good.
Yeah. I mean, I like investigating. We know our good buddy Dr. Mike has a clue deck, so I'm sure he put this right into that.
He did. All right, Max, what's next for you?
My next one is Flesh Taker. This is a creature, human assassin. It's a 2/2 for white and a black. It says, whenever you sacrifice another creature, you gain 1 life and scry 1 card. And then you can also pay 1 generic mana to sacrifice another creature to give Flesh Taker +2/+2 until end of turn. Creepy art.
The art is great,
The scare cow in the middle of the field holding a cleaver. And it's its own sacrifice outlet. That's always nice in Commander. And then gaining life and scrying cards is great. I definitely am putting this right into my Regnan Krav deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one more of those kind of aristocrat effects where the stuff you're sacrificing is doming everybody. One of those kind of blood artist kind of things, I guess I should say. And if you have multiples of those in play, that damage adds up very, very quickly. And you're also getting scries off this, so then you scry down and find the next thing you want to get to that you can, help sacrifice stuff. It's just a really, really good card, particularly in that kind of deck, like your Raiden Croft deck.
Yeah.
And again, I can't stress how creepy that art is.
Yeah.
So I guess there's not a ton to say about Infernal Grasp because this was probably one that got covered on a lot of reviews, even among the mythics and the rares. But we'll talk about it here briefly because it is a fantastic uncommon. I'm a 1 and a black, instant speed, destroy target creature and you lose 2 life. That's not terrible at all, even in a 20 life format. In a 40 life format, I mean, this is one of the better black removal spells now. It just is. All of a sudden, it's a better Go for the Throat, and Go for the Throat was already heavily played.
Yeah.
So this is just one of those things that you're just going to see a lot of this down the road. And, even if it maybe doesn't entirely make the cut because there's a lot of competition in black, it's one of those things where, like, I would almost guarantee every black deck I at least start putting together a rough draft of, this is going to go in that first 120 cards. Whether it makes the cut at the end is going to depend on what I'm doing, but, like, it's going in that go for the throat slot for me, where it's on that short list of the black removal spells I'm going to be considering running.
Very nice. Okay, I have one more for sure, Dana.
Okay.
So my next card is Might of the Old Ways. It's an instant for 1 and a green. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. That's not very fancy, but it has the Coven keyword that says if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, draw a card. I like that it replaces itself. It doesn't give trample, which is kind of a bummer, but you could easily use this defensively or offensively and still probably get that card draw trigger to go off.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably where this kind of thing shines is I've seen some variants on the Calamax deck where it's kind of a combat damage deck where it's running like giant growth kind of effects or berserk effects that it's going to copy to make a creature do extra damage. This is a nice spot for that kind of thing, is in this kind of card in that deck where it's replacing itself to also get you to the next buff that you're going to cast. So, yeah, and again, this is one that in Limited I'd be all over for sure.
For sure.
I have a couple more here I'm going to, I'll talk about that I think are actually worth running. Reckless Impulse is one of my favorites. It's a sorcery, but it's 1 in a red. Exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So red Impulse draw. That's really, really efficient, though. It's, kind of a light up the stage, splits the difference between the full cost and light up the stage and the spectacle cost and light up the stage. So, sometimes you find yourself where you can't get that swing through for light up the stage. You have to pay the 3. This kind of splits that difference where it's just always going to be 1 in red versus occasionally being a red. That's still a really good rate, like particularly in a red, 1 in a red, to have access to the next 2 cards, and it's not this turn, it's until the end of your next turn. So, like, what's the worst case scenario? You get your land this turn and next turn, your land drops. Odds are you'll have 1 card you can play here as well. That's not going to be a land, but, like, I just think that's a really efficient piece of draw in red. I talked about loving Night's Whisper in black and wanting to get kind of the new premier version we're going to get from the Secret Lairs. This is kind of red's Night's Whisper, basically. It's 2 mana, access to 2 cards. That's just almost always useful in most red decks.
Yeah, for sure. It's just doing red things. I definitely see that being played quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have one final card, and it's green, and it's Laid to Rest. 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a human you control dies, draw a card. And then whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you gain 2 life. I mean, humans are one of the most popular tribes in Magic and Commander. Gaining benefit for playing creatures and letting them die is huge, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, drawing a card just to chump block something, I totally like that.
Yeah, and this is, we talked about things that trigger once a turn. A lot of times you see that kind of thing with these cards where, if this triggers once a turn, it's way less interesting. If you're playing a human tribal deck, being able to put this out and force anyone who wants to board wipe to look at this situation and go, if I board wipe right now, they're going to draw 7 cards.
Yeah.
Like for that reason, even if you're not doing sacrifice stuff, if you were playing a human tribal-ish deck, or at least a deck that's got 20-some humans in it, which is very easy to do just accidentally sometimes, if you're not playing elves or something, just in those colors, you can run this and just have it be a strong deterrent to board wipes, if nothing else.
Yeah. Or even, you could use it, you swing out and then you cast the board wipe.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we've all done that before.
Yeah. No, that's a really, really solid card. And that's even before we get into if the creature you control with a +1 counter on it dies, you gain life.
Yeah.
That's just probably a little bonus, but that's still a really solid card even without that.
For sure.
I have 2 more here I'm going to quick talk about. The first is Moon Silver Key. This did get a little bit of discussion back in Midnight Hunt. It's a 2-mana artifact. It says 1 and tap and sacrifice it. Search your library for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic land card and reveal it and put it in your hand and then shuffle. So you can go get a Soul Ring with this. It's a 3-mana tutor to go get a Soul Ring, and that maybe doesn't feel great in a lot of decks, but there's somewhere you don't have any way to do that too. If you're playing green and want to go get your Soul Ring, you don't have a way to do that. This lets you go do that. And that's just Soul Ring that's very efficient. There's other things that you can go do to do that as well. I've seen people, you can go get your Forsaken Monument.
Yeah. You could also go get your Great Henge.
Yeah. Like, there's just really good things you can go get with this, and it lets you do that in colors that don't really have good ways to do some of those things. And, I had contemplated, again, putting this in a deck where I wound up not using it, but, like, I thought about putting it in my jury deck that cares about sacrificing things. Like, I can, just use this and crack it to go get another thing that I'm going to sacrifice, too. So, if I'm want to put some counters on jury, crack the Moonsilver Key to go get a Mind Stone that I could play to sacrifice to draw a card, get 2 jury triggers right there, and basically replace itself by going to get the card off the Mind Stone. So yeah, there's multiple ways this is useful in different decks.
For sure.
And the last one I think I am going to talk about here, because we're doing a little bit shorter of a show because just the 3 of us, Lunar Frenzy. Excuse me, just the 2 of us. Can't even count.
The cat's not even around.
No kidding.
Dana.
Yeah, it's been quiet. Lunar Frenzy is X and red. Target creature you control gets +X+O. So that's black used to have this kind of effect way back in the day on Howl from Beyond. What's better about this, though, is it also gains First Strike, and it also gains Trample. So if you are playing in some kind of deck that has, access to mana or is going to alpha strike people out, being able to just buff a swinging creature, give it a First Strike to kill whatever it's going to deal with, and then trample damage over the top of that, I think Lunar Frenzy is a really, really solid card, particularly as an uncommon. There's just a lot of utility. Again, it was one that I had on my short list to put in my jury deck, just for the ability to, when I go sacrifice jury, sacrifice a handful of treasure tokens that are going to all then put counters on jury because of the sacrifice, and then use all that mana to Lunar Frenzy him to give him another, +12 or something. And then he dies, and I, kill somebody with it, basically. It wound up not making the final cut, but, that's a really good card in that kind of deck. So
yeah,
I think that's a solid card in a lot of places, particularly if you're looking to do combat damage things or have really good reasons to buff something up. I actually had considered it in my Kresh deck for a while, too. Kresh gets bigger whenever a thing dies. Someone goes to, board wipe or something, or I guess board wipe wouldn't work because Kresh dies, but whatever, if something's going to die, throw Lunar Frenzy on it, even if it's not your own creature, and buff it up by 8. That's just 8 more counters that go on to Kresh.
Are you considering this for Kedis and Crom?
I had thought about it, but I usually don't have enough mana in that I wouldn't want to pump 5 mana into it or something, because I'm usually trying to cast a spell and then copy the spell. So I'm better off giving a creature +3/+3 or something like that, and then just copying it. It would just cost less mana. Okay. But it's a really solid card, I think. So it's one worth looking at for sure.
Sweet.
Okay, so I think we have a shorter show. Like I said, there's only 4 of us here today. 5 of us, whatever my math wound up being. So I think that is going to wrap up our look at the commons and uncommons from Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. But before we kind of slide out of here, Max, have you done any of the Crimson Vow stuff yet, or Midnight Hunt stuff? Have you gotten cards for your decks yet, or are you still waiting to get around it to upgrade?
I'm waiting to get around.
I am always very good at doing that, except for the most part, I have not done either of these 2 sets. All year long, I was good about it, and in part because life's been busy, but the burnout did kind of hit me finally this fall. That's a lot of sets. I just needed to take my time on these, and I haven't done many upgrades.
And the cards we talked about are pretty generic in the sense that they can go into most decks, but a good chunk of the cards from both of these sets are so specific to this day-night stuff, or the blood tokens, or the, vampires and zombies, which, I have a zombie deck. There are some cool cards that'll probably go in it, but compared to maybe a set that's set on Dominaria or Ravnica, I think there are not as many universally applicable cards that could go into decks in these 2 sets compared to others.
I think that's a good point to make. I think you see that generally speaking in tribal sets anyway, because they so focus on, there's cards that just care about zombies or vampires or whatever. And I think it's doubly so because of the day-night mechanics and things like the blood tokens or whatever. There's a lot of synergy here with things that unless you're doing that thing, there's just less options for you to find cards for your deck. So yeah, I think if you were going to be slow or even just take a set or 2 off, this was probably the time to do it. I like Innistrad, but it's also the kind of thing where I think on average there's probably just less cards here for your non-specifically Innistrad-esque decks.
Yeah.
All right. That is going to wrap up episode 294 of Commander Central. I am Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our podcast is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find them on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back next week with a new show. Until then, I'm Data.
And I'm Max.